Money is earned with the mind, not with hard work. The Hidden Rules of the Rich. Audiobook. Prologue. The Big Reveal. When I was a child, maybe just like you, I was taught that the road to a better life was paved with hard work. I heard phrases like, "He who gets up early, God helps him," or "He works until your hands bleed, and someday you will succeed." Those phrases were repeated at home, at school, and even on television. And back then, I believed them without question. I thought that if I worked more hours than everyone else, if I worked twice as hard, my life would inevitably be better. But it was enough to open my eyes and observe reality to realize something uncomfortable. The people who work the most physically are not, in most cases, the richest. I knew workers who got up at 4 a.m. and returned home late at night with exhausted bodies and worn hands, but who lived counting down the days to collect their next paycheck. There were also farmers, market loaders, masons, people who delivered every drop of their energy and still could barely afford the basics. On the contrary, there were people who seemed to live in another world. They didn't run, they didn't wear themselves out physically, they didn't sweat more than everyone else. They spent hours thinking, making calls, analyzing numbers, and yet generating income that seemed unattainable for those who relied solely on their strength and physical endurance. This was my first great lesson. The world does not reward the one who is exhausted the most, but the one who knows how to place their chips. In a factory where I worked during my adolescence, the contrast was brutal. There were the workers with endless days, moving parts, assembling products, repeating the same movement hundreds of times a day. Their pay was fair, but not abundant. Instead, the owner, who appeared perhaps twice a week, arrived calmly, reviewed reports, signed documents, talked to managers, and left. The entire company worked even if he was not there. The difference was not luck, nor was it that he worked less in the real sense. It was that his job consisted of deciding, planning, delegating. While some exchanged hours of life for money, he exchanged ideas for results. This made me understand that there is an invisible hierarchy of value at work. Not all effort is equally valuable in economic terms. Physical effort has a limit. You can work 10, 12, or 15 hours, but your body and your time are finite. On the other hand, intellectual and strategic effort has the capacity to multiply. A single idea can generate a system that produces income every day, even if you are not present. A well-thought-out decision can open doors that 10 years of hard work could never open. Let's think of a closer example. Imagine two bakers. The first one opens his business alone, kneads, bakes, serves the customer, cleans, and closes. He works 16 hours a day. The second, on the other hand, spends his initial time creating a unique recipe, looking for a work team, establishing agreements with cafes and restaurants. In a matter of months, while the first continues to sell bread on his counter, the latter has several points of sale, a team that produces and distributes, and he focuses solely on innovating and improving the business. Which of the two is more exhausted? The first. Which of the two earns more? The second. Not because he is smarter by nature, but because he understood that wealth is not created only with hands, but with a head. This difference between working hard and working strategically is so powerful that it explains much of the economic inequality we see in the world. It's not that rich people work less in terms of commitment, it's that they focus their energy on actions that have a multiplier effect. A worker can produce a piece of bread, a piece of furniture, or a document in a certain amount of time. An entrepreneur, an investor, or a creator can generate a system that produces thousands without having to be at every stage of the process. Look at the case of a writer. He can spend a whole year writing a book. That's intense intellectual work, but once published, every sale generates income without him having to rewrite it every time. Or a musician. He records an album, and the royalties come to him for years. Or a software developer who creates an app, and every download, every subscription keeps producing income long after the hard part of the job is over. This doesn't mean there's no effort. It means the initial effort is placed in a structure that generates value repeatedly. The uncomfortable truth is that money does not follow sweat. Money follows strategy, ingenuity, the ability to solve problems efficiently and scalably. This can make those of us who grew up uncomfortable, thinking that virtue was in the number of hours worked, that the more tired you ended the day, the prouder you could be. Economic reality does not measure fatigue. It measures the impact, the value generated, in the ability to multiply that value. And it's not a matter of despising physical labor. All labor is dignified. A building doesn't rise without workers. A field does not produce without farmers. A city doesn't function without those who maintain its infrastructure. But if what we are looking for is financial freedom and not just subsistence, we must accept that relying exclusively on physical labor is like rowing against the current. You can move forward, yes, but your speed and endurance will always be limited. I have known people who understood this and made a radical change in their lives. A mechanic who decided to train others instead of repairing each car himself. A chef who turned his recipes into a franchise. A seamstress who stopped selling garments by the unit and began producing bulk for stores all over the country. They all had something in common. They stopped trading time for money and started trading ideas for systems, systems for assets, and assets for freedom. Change is not always comfortable. It requires unlearning much of what we were taught about work and success. It requires questioning traditions, customs, and even family beliefs. But once you do, there's no going back. You begin to see that the real engine of wealth is not how much you work, but where you put your mental energy. That's the starting point. Understanding that money is a consequence not of raw effort, but of intelligent effort. That the richest people aren't necessarily the ones who work the most hours, but those who have found a way to put the time, money, and skills of others to work in their favor. That your ability to imagine, plan, and execute a strategy can be infinitely more valuable than your ability to resist tiredness. When you internalize this, everything changes. The way you make decisions changes. What once seemed risky begins to look like an opportunity. What once seemed secure, a steady job with fixed hours, begins to look like a time trap. Do you understand that in the money game, the mind is the most important muscle you have, and that developing it is the best investment you will make in your life? But before continuing, write the comments from which city you are listening to this audiobook, and if this message is resonating with you, like and share this material. This way you make sure you don't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer every day to the life you really deserve. There is no time to lose. Now we continue. Chapter number 1. The lie we were told since we were children. For as long as we can remember, phrases about hard work have been present as a kind of family anthem. Son, work hard and you will be someone in life. He who does not work does not eat. If you want something, you must earn it with the sweat of your brow. These ideas are repeated from generation to generation, transmitted by parents, grandparents, teachers, community leaders, and even by advertising. But almost no one stops to ask where this narrative comes from, or if it is still true in today's world. In the past, in mainly agricultural or industrial societies, physical labor was the main engine of the economy. The more strength, endurance, and dedication demonstrated, the more they produced, and in theory, the more could gain. The farmer who worked the most land, the carpenter who made the most furniture, the blacksmith who forged the most tools could stand out and gain a better position. It was logical then that the message of working hard would work as a guide. However, time changed the board.
The Industrial Revolution gave way to the Information Age, and now productivity is no longer measured by the number of hours or the weight of physical effort, but by the value created and the ability to multiply it. The problem is that our cultural beliefs did not evolve at the same pace as the economy. In many families, the one who sacrifices physically is still celebrated more than the one who thinks strategically. If a young person decides to stay at home researching, reading, or creating a digital business, they may be seen as lazy by their parents. If another gets up at 5 a.m. and returns at 9 p.m. exhausted, they receive applause for their commitment, even though their income barely covers basic expenses. This disconnect between social recognition and economic reality is one of the biggest traps we face. School, far from correcting this bias, often reinforces it. The traditional education system was designed for the industrial age, not for the information age. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, schools prepared children to become good employees, obedient, punctual, able to follow instructions and repeat processes. This model is still in force in many countries. We are taught to memorize facts, to follow rules, and to stick to schedules. But we are rarely taught how to invest, to create a business, to solve complex problems, or to generate passive income. We are trained to make efficient gears in a machine, not to build our own machine. I remember Miguel, a man I knew in my youth. From the age of 18, he worked in a textile factory. He had a reputation for being the most accomplished employee. He was never late, never absent, always accepting overtime. For 35 years, he earned the respect of his colleagues and bosses. When the company went through a crisis and cut staff, Miguel was one of those laid off. He was unemployed at age 53, with few skills outside the factory, without sufficient savings, and in poor health from the repetitive work. His entire life had been dedicated to effort, but not to creating anything of his own. Miguel failed, not because of laziness, but because he blindly trusted a system that was never designed to give him true freedom. Another story that marked me was that of Rosa, a street vendor in a local market. She worked from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. without rest in the sun and rain. She sold fruits and vegetables with a minimal profit margin. Each day depended on how much she could sell in those hours of physical labor and direct contact with customers. One day she got sick and could not work for a week. That week she had no income. Rosa was an example of sacrifice and perseverance, but her economic model was completely tied to her physical presence. The day she did not work, she did not earn. These examples are not exceptions. They are the norm in many places. Millions of people are still trapped in the idea that more hours of work automatically equals more success, but today's world does not work that way. In fact, there are people who with just a few hours of strategic work a day achieve income that others would not reach even in a year of strenuous days. The difference is not in strength, but in direction. An oar that moves fast in the wrong direction only takes you further away from your destination. The origin of this lie is not necessarily malicious. Our parents and grandparents passed on the advice to work hard because it was what worked in their time, or because it was the only thing they knew. They lived in a world where job stability and economic advancement depended on loyalty to a company or perseverance in a trade. But today, loyalty no longer guarantees anything. Job stability is fragile, and traditional trades are changing or disappearing faced to automation and globalization. The funny thing is that even when we have clear examples that wealth comes more from strategy than from physical effort, we continue to cling to the old paradigm. We admire the great entrepreneurs, the investors, the creators, but when we analyze how they got there, we often discover that it was not because they worked more hours, but because they worked on different things, because they focused on decisions that multiplied their results. Think of Henry Ford. He didn't become a millionaire because he made every car himself. His genius was to create a production line that would multiply the work of his employees, reduce costs, and increase production. Steve Jobs didn't assemble ones in a workshop. His role was to design, innovate, direct, and make strategic decisions. Even on a smaller scale, a small entrepreneur who delegates the operation and concentrates on expanding his business is applying the same principle. And here's the most important point. The lie of work hard and you will win is not that hard work doesn't work. It works, but only to a certain extent. Without strategic direction, hard work is like running on a hamster wheel, a lot of movement, little real progress. When you understand this, you begin to question how many of the hours you put in each day are actually leading you toward a goal of freedom, or if they are just fueling a routine that doesn't change your situation in the long run. Chapter number 2: The Invisible Power of Mindset. When you look at rich people closely, it doesn't take long for you to realize that their way of thinking is radically different from that of most. It's not just that they have more money, but that they interpret the world differently. While most wonder how much it's going to cost me, they ask how much it's going to leave me. Where others see problems, they see opportunities in disguise. Where most are afraid, they're curious. This mental difference is no coincidence. It's the result of habits, experiences, and conscious decisions that have shaped the way they view the money game. One of the most obvious characteristics is their ability to think in terms of value and not price. If you introduce most people to a course, a business, or an investment that costs $1,000, the first thing they do is think about what they lose by paying that amount. A wealthy-minded person, on the other hand, analyzes how much they could earn or learn from that investment. For them, money is a tool, not a trophy to be kept and protected in fear. This perspective allows them to move their capital like a farmer who sows seeds hoping to multiply his harvest, rather than being left with a sack of grain that will sooner or later rot. The mind, when trained, can become a real money factory. Not because it magically produces bills, but because it generates ideas, strategies, and solutions that are transformed into income. Think of an inventor who creates a product that solves a real problem. His initial work may last months or years, but once launched, sales can be sustained and grow over time. Think of a digital content creator who publishes videos, courses, or books. Each piece he produces can generate income on a recurring basis, long after it is created. These people are not directly exchanging their time for money, but their ideas for a constant stream of value. But to get to this level, it's often necessary to reprogram the mind. The problem is that we are born and grow up in environments that instill limiting beliefs in us. Money is dirty, the rich are greedy, winning a lot is almost impossible without cheating someone. With these ideas floating around in our heads, even if we have a good opportunity in front of us, we may reject it due to fear or guilt. Reprogramming the mindset involves a process of unlearning. It's like deleting old software full of bugs to install a new and more efficient one. And it's not easy, because it means challenging the deepest voices we have heard since childhood. It means questioning phrases that our parents may have told us with good intentions, but that have limited us. It implies understanding that wanting to prosper is not a selfish act, but a way to expand your capacity to help, to create, and to leave a mark.
A good exercise to start this mental change is to observe how you react to certain situations. If you see someone driving a luxury car, you immediately think, surely they got it dirty, or wonder what value they created to be able to afford that. If you hear that an acquaintance made a lot of money from an investment, you are overcome with envy or curiosity to understand how they did it. These automatic reactions are signs of the programming you have inside. The rich mindset also understands the value of failure. While most avoid any risk for fear of losing, the rich see losses as part of learning. An entrepreneur once told me, "Every time I lose money, I see it as the cost of an advanced course that no one else could teach me." This way of thinking allows them to move faster, try more things, and therefore increase their odds of finding something that works. Another key point is that wealthy people rarely rely on a single source of income. They understand that money to multiply needs several streams flowing into them. Just as a river is fed by several tributaries, they create businesses, investments, partnerships, and projects that constantly add value. This doesn't mean that they work on 1,000 things at once in a chaotic way, but rather that they build their income like a network that doesn't collapse if one of the threads breaks. Finally, reprogramming the mind requires surrounding yourself with the right people. The conversations you have, the books you read, the videos you watch, all of that shapes your view of the world. If you're surrounded by people who see money as an enemy, you're likely to adopt their vision.
But if you surround yourself with people who see it as a tool to create, innovate, and give, your perception starts to change naturally. This is not about blindly imitating, but about absorbing broader perspectives that allow you to act with intelligence and vision. In short, the rich mindset is not a genetic issue or a gift reserved for a few. It is a daily construct, a set of mental habits that you can adopt if you are willing to unlearn what limits you and train your mind to identify, create, and multiply opportunities. True wealth begins in the head long before it reaches the bank account. Chapter number 3, The Lazy Millionaire. More brain, less effort. When people hear the phrase lazy millionaire, the first thing they imagine is someone lying in a hammock drinking a Coke while money falls from the sky. And while the image may be funny, the reality is very different. So-called productive laziness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means working so smart that most of the effort is done by other resources, people, or systems, and not your own body constantly. It's the ability to design mechanisms that continue to generate value even if you're not around. Think about nature. A smart farmer doesn't spend all day hand-watering each plant. He invests time and initial energy to install an automatic irrigation system. That system, once put in place, does the repetitive work for him. The farmer continues to supervise, correct, and improve, but he no longer relies on his daily physical effort to get plants grown. That's productive laziness, putting your energy where it will have the most impact, not on tasks that can be delegated or automated. Leveraging the work of others isn't exploiting them, it's creating win-win relationships. A restaurant owner, for example, doesn't cook every dish or serve every table. He hires chefs, waiters, and managers who bring their talents in exchange for a salary or a stake. He brings the vision, capital, marketing, and strategy, while his team runs the day-to-day operations. Everyone gets something. The owner makes a profit, the employees get income and experience, and the customers get a service. I remember the case of Daniel, a young man who started selling t-shirts online. At first, he bought the fabric himself, designed, printed, packaged, and shipped. He soon realized that if he wanted to scale, he had to let go of some of the control. He looked for a print shop that could produce on demand, hired a freelance designer for new models, and delegated the shipment to a logistics company. Daniel stopped spending hours glued to the machine and started spending his time improving advertising, finding large clients, and closing partnerships. His sales grew while he worked fewer operating hours. What was once a grueling business became a system that worked even while he slept. This is the core of the concept. If every dollar you earn depends directly on your physical presence, you're limited. On the other hand, if you create something that can be sold or used repeatedly without your constant intervention, you open the door to automatic revenue. Let's think of concrete examples. An author writes a book only once, but that book can sell thousands of times in the coming years. A musician composes a song and receives royalties every time it is played. A developer creates an app, and each download generates income for him. Even in brick-and-mortar businesses, the principle holds. A laundromat owner can set up several branches with staff and automated systems. A franchisor can license his brand and collect royalties for every sale his franchisees make. An intergame can also do this with apps. A real estate investor can rent properties and receive monthly rent without being present at every transaction. In all these cases, the person invests time and initial effort to set up the system, but then the flow of money continues with minimal daily intervention. The funny thing is that many people associate this type of model with luck or privilege, when in reality, it's the result of a change of mentality. It's not that these people don't work, it's that they choose to work on creating systems that work for them. Productive laziness requires intelligence, patience, and planning. It requires saying no to the temptation to figure it all out yourself, even if that seems faster at first. A common misconception is to believe that being productively lazy is something only great entrepreneurs can do. The truth is, anyone can apply it. A teacher can record their classes and sell them as online courses. A craftsman can design a product line and outsource its production. A photographer can license his images to photo banks. It doesn't matter if the business is big or small. The key is finding a way to make your time not the only income-generating resource. The difference between unproductive laziness and productive laziness is that the former is based on avoiding work and staying inactive, while the latter invests in building something that works without you. It's like the difference between a sailor who rows all the time and another who sets sail. The rower may feel very busy, but his advancement depends entirely on his strength. The one who sets the sail invests time at the beginning, but then the wind does much of the work for him. If you look at the real millionaires, you'll notice that almost all of them practice this philosophy, even if they don't call it that. They devote their energy to strategic decisions and let the operational tasks be done by trained people or machines designed for it. Their mind is free to spot new opportunities, innovate, and grow, instead of getting caught up in the daily grind. Productive laziness also has an emotional component, learning to let go. Many people fail to delegate because they believe that no one will do things as well as they do. And it's true, they may not do it the same at first, but if you invest time in training, documenting processes, and creating clear systems, the time will come when things work without you having to micromanage them. This act of trust is what allows a business to grow beyond your personal limits. Ultimately, being a lazy millionaire is understanding that your most valuable resource is not money or even time, it's your attention. Where you put your attention, you put your life. If you spend it on repetitive tasks, your growth stagnates. If you focus it on creating systems and alliances that generate income on autopilot, your life expands. And there, even if you keep working, you'll feel like money flows with less effort and more intelligence. Chapter number 4. I activate that active work. When we talk about money, most people automatically think of a job, a traditional job, a fixed schedule, a salary that comes in every month. That's the most common way to earn income. You work, you get paid. You don't work, you don't get paid. That's called linear income because it's directly tied to your time and effort. Every hour you invest produces a specific payout, and when those hours stop, the flow of money stops. This model, although stable in the short term, has an obvious limit: your energy, your health, and the number of hours you can work in a day.
No matter how high your salary is, if everything depends on you being physically present, your potential is locked in an invisible cage. Asset income, on the other hand, works completely differently. An asset is something that once created or acquired continues to generate value with little or no ongoing intervention on your part. It's the opposite of linear income because it's not limited by your time but can be multiplied regardless of how many hours you work. The key difference is this: in linear income, you're the engine. In asset income, the engine is out, and you just start it and supervise it. A simple example: a doctor can make a lot of money treating patients, but if he's not in the office, he doesn't generate income. On the other hand, if that same doctor writes a book about his specialty, records a course, or invests in a clinic that works with other professionals, he has created assets. Those assets will continue to produce money even while he sleeps, travels, or spends time with his family. This is where the mindset shift begins. Stop thinking only about how much you can earn by working more hours and start thinking about what you can create or acquire that generates income for yourself. There are 4 main types of assets that, if properly managed, can lead you to financial freedom. The first is the financial asset. This includes stocks, bonds, mutual funds, high-yield accounts, and any instrument that puts your money to work for you. It's like planting a tree that bears fruit every season. At first, it requires an investment, but then it produces periodic income without you having to constantly water with your time. The second type is the intellectual property asset. This includes books, music, patents, software, trademarks, and any creation that can be reproduced or licensed indefinitely. A writer who publishes a book doesn't need to rewrite it every time someone buys it. A recorded song can be played on hundreds of radio stations and platforms at the same time, generating steady royalties. This type of asset is particularly powerful because if it's successful, it can continue to generate income for decades. The third type is real estate assets.
Buying properties to rent or develop is one of the oldest and most proven ways to generate passive income. An apartment building, an office, or even a commercial premises can provide rent month by month, and with good management, that flow can be maintained and even grow over time. The interesting thing about real estate is that in addition to rental income, properties usually increase in value over the years, creating a double profit: cash flow and capital appreciation. The fourth type is the asset of automated systems and businesses. This includes businesses that operate with minimal intervention of the owner thanks to clear processes, trained personnel, and increasingly, technology. It can be an online store with outsourced logistics, a franchise, a digital subscription service, or a network of ATMs. Here, the key is not that the business does not require work, but that that work does not depend exclusively on you. The difference between assets and active work is so profound that it completely changes the way you live. Imagine two people with similar incomes. One earns $5,000 a month in a job, and the other earns $5,000 a month in assets. The first must continue to work to maintain that level. If it stops, the income vanishes. The second may decide to work less, travel, start new projects, or simply enjoy more free time because their flow of money does not depend on their constant presence. An important point is that building assets does not mean abandoning active work immediately. Many people start by combining both things. Use linear income to finance the acquisition or creation of assets, and little by little, these assets replace the income from work. Thus, the day they decide to leave their job or reduce their hours, they do so with the assurance that their lifestyle is supported by independent sources of income. Building assets requires patience and vision. It's not about looking for quick money, but about planting seeds that will grow and bear fruit for many years. While most focus on earning more in their work, the truly rich devote much of their energy to finding, improving, and multiplying assets. That is the big difference. They do not work more, they work better, and choose financial and business vehicles that allow them to break the barrier of time and physical effort. The move from relying exclusively on active work to living on active income is like stopping rowing and learning to sail with the wind. At first, it's harder because you have to build the boat, learn how to handle the sails, and get to know the sea. But once you master the process, you move faster and with less effort, and most importantly, you can decide where to go without fatigue being the factor that dictates your limits. Chapter number 5: The Art of Multiplying Time. Most people live trapped in the idea that time is something that is spent and not recovered, as if every day is an unalterable countdown. But the rich and strategists think differently. They understand that while you can't create more hours in the day, you can multiply the effect of those hours. And this changes everything, because it's no longer about how much you work and becomes a question of how much value you produce with the time you have. And here come two powerful allies: delegation and automation. Delegating is not simply passing the work on to someone else to avoid effort, as some believe. It's an art that requires vision and confidence. It means freeing up your time to dedicate it to the activities with the greatest impact, those that only you can do or that really move the needle in your business or in your life. The trap that many people fall into is thinking that no one will do as well as me, and with that belief, they end up drowning in operational tasks while great opportunities pass them by. The truth is that if you want to play in the major leagues, you must stop being a totalologist and become an orchestraduntant. You don't play all the instruments, but you manage to make them all sound in harmony. Let's think of a concrete example. An entrepreneur who tries to handle sales, social media, accounting, customer service, and logistics on his own not only gets exhausted, but inevitably starts making mistakes. But if that same entrepreneur hires a virtual assistant for the administrative part, a community manager for networks, and an accountant for the numbers, suddenly his days are freed up to focus on strategy, partnerships, and expansion. The cost of paying those professionals is much less than the value gained by regaining time for high-level decisions. However, delegating does not mean forgetting everything. It requires a clear process, defining the task, explaining the objective, and providing the necessary tools for the person assigned to work autonomously. The secret is delegating responsibilities, not just actions, so that the delegee feels that the end result is theirs and is truly committed to it. That's the difference between a team that only follows orders and one that drives your vision even when you're not present. The second great time multiplier is automation. We live in an era where technology allows many tasks to be done on their own without constant human intervention, from emails that are sent automatically based on customer behavior to systems that register and process sales 24 hours a day. Automation turns repetitive processes into silent machines that work day and night. The advantage is not only the speed, but the consistency. A digital tool doesn't tire, it doesn't get distracted, and it makes no mistakes for lack of attention. In illustrative case, an online store that previously received orders manually and had to confirm payments one by one can implement an integrated payment system and inventory software that updates stock in real time. Now, every time a customer buys, the entire flow activates itself: payment confirmation, stock update, shipment preparation, and customer notification. What used to require daily hours of work now happens in seconds without human intervention. Automation is not limited to digital businesses. A restaurant can automate its reservations, a gym can manage membership renewals without phone calls, and a lawyer can schedule the sending of appointment reminders or documents without having to write each message. The more predictable tasks are automated, the more time is available for the creative, strategic, and human relations part, which is where value is really generated. And here comes the most powerful point. When you combine delegation and automation, you enter an exponential dynamic.
Delegating frees your time from tasks that require human judgment and personal contact. Automating takes care of the repetitive and mechanical. Thus, every hour of yours is worth more because it is focused on what has the greatest return. An entrepreneur who invests 2 hours in closing a 6-figure deal is using his time better than one who spends those same 2 hours answering routine emails. Another essential aspect to multiply time is to understand that not all tasks have the same weight. This is where the Pareto law, or 80-20 rule, comes in. 80% of the results come from 20% of the actions. If you identify what those few high-impact actions are and delegate or automate the rest, your productivity skyrockets. It's not about being busy all day, but about being busy with what really matters. Finally, multiplying time is also a matter of mindset. You must be willing to invest in systems, people, and tools before you feel like you need it urgently. Many expect to be saturated to delegate or automate, but the most successful do it sooner, preparing the structure so that their growth doesn't become a trap of more work. Because true freedom is not having more hours available, but that those hours are yours to decide how to live them. Chapter number 6: The Premature Luxury Trap. The premature luxury trap is one of the most common reasons why people with great financial potential end up trapped in a cycle of scarcity disguised as abundance. We live in a culture that pushes us to show what we have, even before we actually have it. The message is clear: if you earn more, spend more. And so, when the first raise, the unexpected bonus, or the first profits of a business arrive, the temptation to change cars, buy designer clothes, or move to a more expensive place is almost irresistible. What few understand is that every premature luxury not only consumes money, but also steals investment opportunities that could multiply that money for the future. The trap works like this. Instead of reinvesting the initial profits to strengthen the machine that generated them, they go to goods that produce no return and in many cases lose value over time. A new car loses part of its price as soon as it leaves the dealership. A luxury watch is kept more for vanity than for utility, and a bigger house involves more taxes, maintenance, and expenses that are not recovered. The worst thing is that once the standard of living is raised, it is very difficult to lower it. That new standard becomes a psychological and economic obligation. The ego is one of the most powerful engines of this trap. We want others to know that we're doing well, and we measure it in external symbols. That photo on social media with the key to your new car, your trip to a trendy destination, or your expensive restaurant become trophies that we display to receive approval and admiration.
But approval is an asset that doesn't pay bills, and the admiration of people who don't contribute to your financial well-being is irrelevant at best. Social competition amplifies the problem. If a friend buys a new car, we feel like we must match or exceed that purchase. If a partner posts pictures of an expensive trip, we feel like we're left behind. There's no end to this game because there will always be someone with more, and the only way to win it is not to play it. The real competition should be with yourself. Are you more financially free today than you were a year ago? Do you have more assets working for you? Is your time less dependent on direct effort? Those are the metrics that matter. There are powerful examples of millionaires and billionaires who understood this perfectly. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for just over $30,000. Ingvar Kamprad, founder of IKEA, traveled economy class and drove a modest car despite having a fortune of billions. These men were not stingy, they simply knew that their wealth was better invested in productive assets than in luxuries that only serve to impress. One of the most illustrative cases is that of an entrepreneur who in the early years of his business decided to live in a small apartment, use public transportation, and reinvest almost 90% of his profits in expanding the company. For a decade, his friends considered him odd because he showed no outward signs of success. But while they spent on cars, parties, and vacations, he was building an empire. Today, he can afford all the luxuries he wants, but his life no longer depends on working to pay for them. His assets generate more than enough to cover them. The paradox is that many people think that these examples are extreme, or that they would also enjoy life if they had money, but they don't understand that precisely because they postponed those luxuries, today they can enjoy it without risking their freedom. It's not an eternal sacrifice, it's a temporary strategy to ensure that when the time comes to enjoy, there are no bills that threaten that tranquility. Avoiding the premature luxury trap requires discipline and long-term vision. It means understanding that during the first few years of financial growth, every coin spent on a luxury is one less coin invested in building freedom. And it's not about living in absolute deprivation, but about differentiating between what's a one-off reward and what's an expensive habit. A special trip paid for with windfall profits can be motivating, but buying a new car every 2 years out of ego can be lethal to your finances. The golden rule is simple. Buy luxuries with the return of your assets, not your main income. If you want an expensive watch, let an asset pay for it. If you dream of a high-end car, first create a source of income that covers its monthly cost without you having to lift a finger. Thus, luxury stops being a burden and becomes a real symbol of freedom, not a golden chain that binds you to keep working non-stop. Ultimately, the difference between who falls into the trap and who avoids it is not the amount of money they make, but the quality of their decisions. Whoever understands that real wealth is the ability to live without fear of running out of money knows that true luxuries are free time, security, and peace of mind. The rest are embellishments that, if not handled intelligently, can become the biggest obstacle to achieving them. Chapter number 7. Investments that work for you. Investing is not simply putting money into something and hoping it grows. It's an art and a science that requires understanding, patience, and discipline. Before you put a single dollar into any investment, there is a fundamental principle that should be engraved in your mind. Never invest in something you don't understand. The history is full of people who lost fortunes because they were seduced by quick promises, by easy gains, or by the pressure not to be left behind when everyone seemed to be entering the opportunity of the century. Understanding what you put your money into is your first line of defense against failure. It's not enough to hear that a friend made money in cryptocurrency, real estate, or stocks. You need to study the terrain, know the risks, understand the mechanism of value generation, and above all, have an exit plan. Before investing, you also need to prepare your personal financial ground. This means having an emergency fund that covers 6 to 12 months of expenses, eliminating high-interest debt, and making sure your personal cash flow is stable. Investing while you're in credit card debt at 40% per year is like trying to fill a swimming pool with a huge hole in the bottom. No matter how much water gets in, it's always going to leak out. The foundation of a healthy investment is not just capital, but the stability that allows you to withstand the ups and downs of the market without panicking and selling at the worst time. Investments can be broadly classified into three broad groups according to their risk: low, medium, and high. Low-risk investments include instruments like government bonds, certificates of deposit, high-yield savings accounts, or conservative index funds. They won't make you a millionaire overnight, but they preserve your capital and generate a steady cash flow. They're ideal for building a solid foundation and protecting money you can't afford to lose. Medium-risk investments include rental properties, diversified index funds, stocks of solid companies with stable track records, and businesses with a proven model. Here, the return may be more attractive, but it involves the need for more active monitoring. For example, a rental property may provide steady income, but it demands attention to maintenance, tenant selection, and payment management. Stocks, although backed by reputable companies, can suffer temporary dips that test your patience.
High-risk investments encompass startups, cryptocurrencies, speculative trading, and certain niches in the real estate market, or burnouts. They can offer huge returns in a short time, but also the possibility of losing all the capital invested. The most common mistake here is to allocate too much money to this type of asset, driven by greed or success stories that hide the vast majority of failures. The sensible rule is clear. Only invest in high risk, the money you are willing to lose without affecting your lifestyle or stability. Analyzing opportunities is a process that requires method. It is never enough to let yourself be carried away by intuition or enthusiasm. You have to check the numbers, understand the projections, and evaluate the credibility of the people behind the project. If it's a company, review its financial statements, investigate its managers, and look for references from customers or suppliers. If it's real estate, study the location, the demand in the area, maintenance expenses, and local market trends. In the case of cryptocurrencies or emerging technology, analyze the development team, the real problem they're looking to solve, and if there is a viable plan to monetize it. To avoid scams, adopt a healthy skepticism. Any investment that guarantees fixed returns that are too high in a short time deserves to be questioned. Phrases such as "you can't miss" or "it's a unique opportunity that you have to take today" are red flags. Scams feed on haste and ignorance. When someone rushes you to make a decision without giving you time to investigate, they're trying to prevent you from discovering the truth. Diversification is another essential key. Don't put all your money into a single type of asset or sector. A well-balanced portfolio combines safe investments with others with greater potential, but distributes the risk so that a loss in one area does not destroy your wealth. Diversification doesn't mean having 20 different meaningless investments, but rather allocating your capital strategically to work on several fronts at the same time. The true investor doesn't live by the minute of the market, but builds systems that generate income even while sleeping. A well-managed property, a portfolio of dividends, royalties from a book or music, or a stake in an automated business are examples of assets that work for you without demanding your constant presence. The goal is that over time, most of your expenses will be covered by these sources, freeing you from the need to work for money and allowing you to choose what you want to spend your time on. Investing is not a game of who earns the most in the shortest time. It's a process of building and protecting wealth that lasts a lifetime. Patience and perseverance far outweigh drive and luck. Whoever starts, learns, corrects mistakes, and reinvests ends up accumulating a financial strength that seems almost inevitable. The secret is to understand that money grows faster when you're not desperate to multiply it, and that the best investments are not the most exciting, but the most sustainable in the long term. Chapter number 8, The Flow of Smart Money. Money by itself has no will or direction. It's like a river. It can flow to a destination that builds prosperity or be lost in currents that dilute it without a trace. What separates those who achieve financial freedom from those who always live on the brink of bankruptcy is not the amount of income, but the way they manage that flow. The 50-30-20 rule is one of the simplest and most effective structures to get it on track, but its true power is activated when its logic is understood and applied with almost military discipline. The rule states that 50% of your income should go to needs,
30% to wants, and 20% to savings or investment. In practice, this means that half of what you earn covers expenses such as housing, food, basic transportation, insurance, and services. It's the foundation for living debt-free and without compromising your stability. The problem is that most people stretch this 50% into 70% or more, getting caught up in excessive rents, unnecessary car loans, or subscriptions they barely use. The smart thing is not to see 50% as an obligation, but as an insurmountable ceiling. If your essential expenses exceed that limit, you don't have an income problem, you have a lifestyle problem. The next 30% is earmarked for wants, which can be travel, leisure, entertainment, or any non-essential expense. This is where many people shoot themselves in the foot financially. They confuse immediate satisfaction with lasting well-being. Buying the latest phone, going out to dinner every week, or changing cars on a whim isn't bad in itself, but it is when it compromises your ability to invest. A disciplined millionaire understands that every dollar spent on a desire could be a dollar multiplied in the future if channeled correctly. That's why, even in this segment, the wealthy tend to spend less than they could, not out of greed, but because they've learned that true luxury is freedom, not objects. The last 20% is the engine of accelerated growth, saving and investment. This is where most fail because they expect to save what is over after spending. The winning strategy is the exact opposite. Set aside that 20% as soon as you receive your income, before temptation or habit dilutes it. That money becomes seed capital for projects, assets, and opportunities that generate more income. And while saving is important, leaving money immobile without an investment plan is like having an army of soldiers that never goes to battle. They're there, but they don't conquer anything. Strategic reinvestment is the key for this system to evolve. It's not about saving for the sake of saving, but about constantly redirecting profits to sources that produce more profits. For example, if a rental property leaves you with a positive monthly flow, instead of spending it, you can use it to acquire another property, diversify in an index fund, or even finance a small business. In this way, each asset you create becomes a machine for generating new assets. It's a cycle where money doesn't die in your hands, but comes back multiplied. The difference with impulse spending is abysmal. Impulse spending is based on emotion. You see something, you want it, and you buy it, without evaluating if that purchase has a return. Strategic reinvestment, on the other hand, is based on patience and long-term vision. To avoid falling into momentum, it's helpful to establish a waiting period for any major purchase. If after 30 days you still want that object or experience, and it's within your assigned budget, go ahead. If not, it was probably just a passing whim. Creating a system that recycles your money involves automating the separation and reinvestment. Today, there are banking and financial tools that allow you to set up automatic transfers like this to investment accounts, savings funds, or diversified portfolios as soon as you receive your income. This eliminates friction and reduces the dependence on willpower that often fails when there are temptations in sight. Imagine that every month you set aside that 20% of your income, place it in a well-diversified portfolio, and review its performance every quarter. Over time, you not only accumulate capital, but you learn to fine-tune the strategy, detect opportunities, and correct mistakes. This continuous learning is as valuable as the money itself because it makes you a more astute manager. A clear example is that of a person who earns $5,000 a month and applies the 50-30-20 rule with discipline. Over time, your investments begin to generate an additional $200 per month. Instead of spending that extra, you reinvest it, which accelerates the exponential growth of your capital. After a few years, that extra flow exceeds your original salary and reaches a point where working is optional. All this without the need of gigantic incomes, but thanks to a system that prioritizes growth over consumption. The flow of smart money is not about restricting yourself to living like a monk, but about giving every dollar a mission. Some will meet your needs, others will give you immediate pleasure, but a fundamental part will be dedicated to building your future freedom. When you understand that money is a tool to multiply time and options, you stop seeing it as a limited resource and begin to treat it as a strategic partner. At that moment, you no longer work just for money. money begins to work for you. Chapter number 9. Turning ideas into real assets. Ideas by themselves have no value. They're like seeds stored in a drawer. They can potentially become leafy trees that bear fruit for generations, but long as they remain stored, they aren't used to feed anyone or generate shade. What really creates wealth is the ability to turn those ideas into tangible assets, that is, into products, services, or systems that work on their own and generate income in a sustained way.
The world is full of people with brilliant thoughts that never materialized into anything. And it is also full of people who took simple ideas and executed them with precision until they transformed them into empires. The difference is not in the initial quality of the idea, but in the strategic action that followed. Detecting a $1 million idea is not an act of magic or divine illumination, but the result of observing problems and needs that do not yet have an efficient or accessible solution. Often, the biggest opportunities are right in front of us, disguised as everyday discomforts. A line that is too long in a restaurant can inspire an app ordering system. The difficulty in finding reliable transportation can lead to a mobility platform. Frustration over clothes that don't fit well can open the way to a brand that customizes sizes. The pattern is always the same: observe, detect friction, and propose a solution that simplifies the lives of others. But identifying the idea is only the first step. The real challenge is to go from the concept to a monetizable product or service. This is where many get paralyzed, thinking that they need a millionaire investment, a gigantic team, or a perfect plan before starting. The reality is that many of the most successful businesses in history started with minimal resources, but with a huge ability to test quickly and adjust on the fly. The initial focus should be to create a minimum viable version, a prototype, a sample, a basic service that allows you to validate the real demand before committing large amounts of time or money. For example, if you have an idea for a line of t-shirts with original designs, you don't need to manufacture 1,000 units to get started. You can produce just a few, show them on social networks, offer them to acquaintances, or sell them in a local market. That small action gives you valuable data. How many people are willing to pay? Which designs do they like the most? How much are they willing to invest? With that information, you can scale with less risk and more certainty. Monetizing an idea also involves designing the revenue model from the beginning. It is not enough to have a good product. It is necessary to define how much, and how often you are going to charge. Will it be a one-time sale, a subscription model, licenses of use, advertising? Each model has advantages and disadvantages, and the right choice depends on the market, the type of product, and the long-term vision. A software can generate recurring revenue through subscriptions, while an artistic work can be monetized through licensed reproductions. The speed of execution is also crucial. Ideas don't have an expiration date, but the market does have windows of opportunity that close quickly. What is innovative today, tomorrow may be common or even obsolete. That's why, instead of seeking perfection from the beginning, the most effective thing to do is to launch quickly, learn from feedback, and continuously improve. This mindset, known as agile iteration, is what allows technology companies and startups to grow at speeds that were previously unthinkable. There are fascinating stories of businesses that were born with zero initial investment and became world leaders. Airbnb, for example, began with its founders renting out inflatable mattresses in their apartment to cover the rent. Dropbox started as a simple video that showed what the application would do before writing a single line of code. These cases show that when the value proposition is clear and solves a real problem, the initial limitations become irrelevant. The key is to use resources you already have on hand. Maybe you have skills that others need and that you can offer as a service. Maybe you have a community or network of contacts that can become your first clients or promoters. Maybe you have specialized knowledge that you can package into a course, a guide, or a consultation. The question you need to ask yourself is not what do I need to get started, but what can I do today with what I have available? Turning ideas into real assets also requires documenting and structuring the process. If your business depends 100% on your physical presence to operate, it's not an asset, it's a job in disguise.
A true asset is something that can continue to generate revenue, even if you are not directly involved all the time. This involves delegating, automating, and standardizing key tasks so that the system works independently. Finally, it is important to understand that million-dollar ideas are not necessarily the most original, but the best executed. Many successful companies did not invent anything new, they simply took something existing and made it faster, cheaper, or more accessible. Innovation, in this sense, can be as simple as improving a process or adapting a product to a new market. When you manage to go from a spark of inspiration to a tangible asset that stands and grows on its own, you enter a virtuous circle. Each new income gives you more resources to develop more ideas, and each new successful idea expands your financial freedom. This is how empires are built, not from distant dreams, but from concrete actions that turn concepts into realities that generate value day after day. Chapter number 10. Total leverage. Leverage is, without exaggeration, one of the most powerful forces that exist to multiply results and accelerate the path to financial freedom. Those who understand it and apply it intelligently stop growing in a linear way and start doing so exponentially. In its simplest essence, leverage consists of using resources that aren't yours to obtain much greater benefits than if you worked only with what you have. It can be time, money, skills, infrastructure, networks of contacts, or even technology. The secret is to identify what resource limits you and find who or what already has it in order to integrate it into your system so that everyone wins. The first type of leverage is that of other people's time. This does not mean exploiting them or taking advantage of them unfairly. It involves generating agreements in which both parties benefit. Think of an entrepreneur who hires a designer to create the image of his brand. That designer has already invested years in developing his skills and can deliver in days what the entrepreneur would take months to learn. By paying for that service, the entrepreneur gains time and speed, while the designer gains income and experience. Delegating tasks to people who are more qualified than you for certain functions is one of the fastest ways to free up your agenda to focus on the strategic. The second type of leverage is that of other people's money. In the world of investments and businesses, this is as old as the first commercial partnerships. Banks, private investors, equity partners, and even crowdfunding work on this principle. Someone puts money in exchange for a return, and you use that money to generate a project or investment that you couldn't finance alone. The trick is to use that capital for activities that produce more income than the cost of obtaining it. If you take out a loan for a business, but the business doesn't generate enough to pay off the debt and make a profit, leverage becomes a trap. That's why before using someone else's money, you need to be very clear on your return plan and minimize risks with data, not assumptions. The third type of leverage is that of the skills of others. Many times, your business or project can move forward by leaps and bounds if you add people who have complementary talents to your own. You don't have to be the best at everything. It's enough to know who and who they are. Think of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. One had the business vision and the ability to sell it, the other had the technical skills to build it. Separately, maybe they would have done interesting things. Together, they created Apple. Strategic partnerships work when each part brings something unique to the table that enhances the whole, and when there is trust and clarity in the agreements. Strategic partnerships deserve a separate mention because, well structured, they can catapult a project to levels that would be impossible to achieve alone. A small manufacturer can partner with a distribution chain to place its products in hundreds of stores without having to invest in its own logistics network. An influencer can partner with an emerging brand to give visibility in exchange for sales share. A programmer can partner with a marketing specialist to launch an app that without that combination would not have the same impact.
In the digital age, technological leverage is one of the most powerful and democratic levers that exist. Just a few decades ago, to reach millions of people, you needed a television channel, a newspaper chain, or an army of salespeople. Today, with a phone and an internet connection, you can spread a message, sell a product, or launch a service on a global scale. Platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Amazon, Shopify, or even artificial intelligence tools like the one you're reading now allow you to automate, scale, and optimize processes that previously required entire teams.
An entrepreneur can schedule ads that work 24 hours a day, respond automatically to customers through chatbots, manage inventories from anywhere in the world, and receive payments in multiple currencies without the need for a physical presence. Technological leverage also involves learning to work with systems that save time and reduce errors. Project management software like Trello or Asana can coordinate international teams without losing information in endless email chains. An automation tool like Zapier can connect different applications so that they work together without human intervention. This not only saves hours of work, but it reduces costs and increases consistency in results. It's critical to understand that leverage isn't just about adding resources, it's about multiplying their impact. If you delegate poorly, borrow out of control, or invest in technology you don't know how to use, leverage becomes a weight instead of a boost. That's why each step should be evaluated based on its expected return and its alignment with your long-term goals. Smart leverage is like a stepping stone. It propels you further and higher with the same effort, but if you misuse it, you can fall out of the pool. Whoever masters the art of leverage lives in a different world. You know that your growth doesn't depend solely on how many hours you work, how much money you have in your account, or how many skills you have. Your growth depends on your ability to connect with the right resources at the right time and get them to work for you in a coordinated manner. This is the real leap in mindset that separates average entrepreneurs from great empire builders. When you combine time, money, skills, and technology strategically, you enter a game where every move creates knock-on effects. A successful launch not only produces immediate revenue, but it attracts new partners, new customers, and new opportunities that in turn can be leveraged again. This is how you go from having a business that survives to having a system that grows on its own, faster and faster, and with less personal effort. Chapter number 11, Building an Automatic System of Wealth. Building an automatic system of wealth is, in a nutshell, the ultimate goal of anyone who wants to live with financial freedom without being chained to a desk, a location, or a fixed schedule. Such a system does not depend on your constant presence. It doesn't collapse if you take vacations, and most importantly, continue to generate income while you sleep, travel, or simply enjoy your life. To create it, you have to understand that wealth is not a one-time event, but the cumulative result of well-designed processes that work on autopilot. These processes combine assets that generate money flow, automation tools, intelligent delegation, and strategic reinvestment to make capital grow as if it had its own life. The first step in the Lazy Millionaire's formula is to define an income model that can work without your direct and constant participation. If your business depends 100% on you being present to generate money, it's not a system, it's a disguised job. Therefore, you have to look for models that are based on digital products, memberships, delegable services, or automated investments. For example, an online course can be sold over and over again without you having to re-record it. A software with a monthly subscription generates recurring income, and a well-diversified investment portfolio produces periodic returns without your daily intervention. The key is that the model is scalable, that selling one more unit does not require the same effort as selling the first. Once the model is defined, the second step is to build a fully documented and repeatable workflow. This involves establishing clear processes for each stage: lead generation, customer conversion, product or service delivery, customer service, and after-sales follow-up. If those steps only exist in your head, your business stops when you are not there. But if they are documented and automated, any team member or even a software can execute it without you having to intervene. This is where digital tools come into play. Email marketing platforms that send messages automatically, collection systems that bill and process payment without you lifting a finger, and CRM, customer management systems that keep an accurate record of every interaction. The third step is people leverage. While technology can do a lot, it can't replace human judgment in key areas. Delegating simply doesn't mean taking tasks away from you, but assigning responsibilities to people more skilled than you in certain areas so that the quality of work rises while you focus on the big picture. A virtual assistant can handle correspondence, a campaign manager can optimize advertising, and a sales specialist can close high-value deals while you take care of the long-term strategy. The lazy millionaire understands that every person in his system is like a piece of machinery that comes greased. It contributes to the overall movement with the team and technology working. The next step is to make sure the money coming in doesn't get stagnant. This is where strategic reinvestment comes in. A wealth system is not limited to generating revenue, it multiplies it. If each month you allocate a portion of the profits to expand the business, improve processes, or acquire new assets, the growth accelerates exponentially. The 50-30-20 is a useful rule. 50% for reinvestment and expansion, 30% to maintain the operation, and 20% for personal benefits or safety cushion. Thus, each sales cycle generates a larger next cycle than the previous one. The real power of an automated system is in its ability to maintain and adapt without your daily supervision. This is achieved with key performance indicators, KISIs, that allow you to measure the health of the system at any time. If sales drop, leads decrease, or profit margins shrink, you can detect the problem before it becomes a crisis. In addition, it's essential to implement periodic, monthly, or quarterly reviews to identify bottlenecks and make adjustments. An automatic system is not a machine that you leave on and forget. It's an organism that evolves and needs adjustments to continue growing. One of the most common mistakes of those trying to build automatic systems is wanting everything to be perfect before launching it. The truth is that a system is never finished. It will always be in the optimization phase. The lazy millionaire releases minimum viable versions, observes how customers react, and improves as it goes. This allows the system to start generating revenue from the beginning while it is refined. Each optimization becomes a lever that increases efficiency, reduces costs, and improves the customer experience. It's also important to diversify the revenue streams within the system. A business with a single product or a single sales channel is vulnerable. If that product stops selling or that channel crashes, the revenue stream stops. That's why the lazy millionaire builds several pipes that feed the same wealth tank. It can be a combination of direct sales, affiliations, ad revenue, investments, and licensing. This way, if one flow temporarily dries up, the others continue to contribute. The ultimate goal of this whole process is to make the money work for you and not the other way around. When your system is well designed, the capital generated doesn't sit dormant in a bank account, but is constantly moving towards new opportunities. A passive income feeds another passive income, and so on, creating a virtuous cycle in which your wealth expands even while you enjoy your free time. At this point, your role stops being that of a worker and becomes that of an architect and supervisor, stepping in only when a major adjustment is needed or to explore new lines of expansion. An automatic wealth system isn't built in a day, but every step you take toward creating it brings you closer to that life where your time is yours and your freedom isn't dependent on a boss, a client, or an agenda. It's the result of thinking strategically, investing smartly, and combining people, processes, and technology into a symphony that keeps playing even if you are not in the room.
When that moment comes, you understand that true wealth is not only the money you have, but the time and peace of mind that money buys you. Chapter number 12. Shielding your wealth. Shielding your wealth is the step that separates those who build fortune from those who simply had a stroke of economic luck. Making money can be relatively quick if done with strategy, but maintaining it, protecting it, and making it grow despite crises, inflation, or bad decisions requires a totally different approach. This is where the mindset of wealth preservation comes into play, which is not the same as that of income generation. When you are in the creation phase, you think about speed, scalability, and opportunities. In the shielding phase, you think about solidity, diversification, and long-term security. This does not mean becoming conservative to the point of paralyzing, but learning to protect the ground gained so that an unforeseen event doesn't erase years of work in a matter of weeks. One of the greatest enemies of wealth is the false sense of invulnerability.
When things are going well, the flow of money is constant and investments generate profits. It's easy to fall into the mistake of thinking that this situation is permanent. But history is full of examples of fortunes that evaporated due to economic crises, changes in legislation, management errors, or even personal accidents. Shielding wealth starts with accepting that no scenario is 100% stable and that the only way to be prepared is to have a backup plan for every possible contingency. This is where the golden rule comes in. Don't put all your eggs in the same basket and make sure the baskets are in different places. Diversification is the first layer of armor. It's not just about having different types of investments, but about distributing them into categories that react differently to the same events. For example, during a recession, real estate may drop in value, but certain assets such as gold, commodities, or even companies with consumer staples tend to remain stable or grow. The idea is that no matter the type of crisis, there is always a portion of your wealth that comes out stronger. This includes geographic diversification. Having investments and accounts in different countries can protect you from political risks, abrupt changes in the local currency, or financial restrictions imposed by a government. The second layer of protection is wealth security at the legal level. Many people accumulate wealth but hold it in their own name, making them vulnerable to lawsuits, excessive taxes, or family problems. Experienced millionaires use structures such as trusts, holding companies, and private foundations to separate ownership of their natural person's assets. This not only reduces legal risks, but it also offers tax benefits and makes it easier to transfer wealth to the next generations without losing control over how it will be used. A well-designed trust can ensure that your wealth continues to generate income for your family, even decades after you're no longer around. Protecting against inflation is another critical pillar. Cash loses value over time, and while having liquidity is important to take advantage of opportunities or face emergencies, keeping too much capital immobile is like letting it rust. Smart investors place a significant portion of their wealth in assets that grow at or above inflation, such as productive real estate, shares of solid companies, or automated businesses that generate steady cash flow. In addition, considering investments in hard currencies or international assets can help balance the effect of localized inflation. But shielding is not only about external threats, you also have to protect yourself from your own mistakes. Overconfidence, impulsive decisions, and investments based on rumors have been responsible for millions of dollars in losses, even for people with great experience. That's why every wealth protection plan should include clear rules to evaluate opportunities before moving capital. This involves establishing objective criteria such as expected return, risk level, liquidity, and fiscal impact, and not deviating from them even if the excitement of the moment invites you to act quickly. A personal cooling policy. Waiting 48 or 72 hours before approving a large investment can be enough to avoid impulsive decisions that compromise wealth. The backup plan is perhaps the most underrated part of wealth protection. Every self-respecting millionaire has one. It consists of a set of measures that are automatically activated in the event of a crisis. It can include anything from a cash reserve equivalent to a year's worth of personal and operating expenses, to a geographic relocation plan if the political or social environment becomes hostile. Some even have prior agreements with international banks, contracts for storage of precious metals in secure vaults, or special insurance that covers everything from natural catastrophes to kidnappings. It's not paranoia, it's foresight. The cost of being prepared is always less than the cost of not being prepared. Part of shielding wealth also involves having a constant monitoring system. It's not enough to diversify and keep documents in a safe. You must know the real state of your wealth at all times. This means reviewing financial statements, investment balance sheets, and risk reports at least once a month. Many investors hire a wealth manager whose sole task is to monitor the health of the portfolio, propose adjustments, and prevent problems before they appear. The discipline of reviewing and adjusting is what keeps the armor plating alive over time. Finally, there's an emotional aspect that is rarely mentioned, learning to live below your means even when you could afford more. It's not about depriving yourself, but about not turning luxury into a habit that makes you vulnerable. Great fortunes are usually kept in families that understand that wealth is a means, not an end, and that its preservation depends on both financial management and the education of those who will inherit it. Teaching the next generations how to manage money, how to invest, and how to protect themselves is as important as any legal structure or diversification strategy. Shielding your wealth is not something that is achieved in a single step. It's an ongoing process that combines strategy, discipline, and long-term vision. It's understanding that what you have built with effort deserves to be protected with the same dedication with which it was created. When you have the peace of mind of knowing that whatever happens in the global economy or in your personal life, your wealth is safe, you can live with true freedom. And that, more than the number of zeros in your account, is the greatest wealth anyone can have. Chapter number 13. Freedom as an end goal. Freedom as an end goal is not an abstract concept or a distant dream, but a concrete goal that can be defined, planned, and achieved if you work with the right strategy. The first step to achieving it is understanding that true financial independence is not about having an infinite amount of money, but about having a constant stream of income that covers all your expenses without you having to work actively. This translates into a financial freedom number, the exact figure that once reached allows you to live as you want without worrying about a lack of resources. Calculating it involves a complete inventory of your fixed and variable expenses, projecting the cost of living in the future considering inflation and possible changes in style, and adding a safety margin for unforeseen events. For example, if your average monthly expenses are $300, you might think that your independence comes with $36,000 a year of passive income, but if you take into account a fund for emergencies, travel, property maintenance, and a reserve for reinvestments, that figure could rise to $50,000 or $60,000 a year. The important thing is not to reach the lowest possible number, but one that gives you peace of mind and stability even in adverse circumstances. Once that goal has been defined, the next step is to build the system that makes it a reality. This is where everything learned in previous chapters comes into play. Invest in assets that generate constant flow.
Diversify to minimize risks. Automate processes so that money works without your daily intervention, and maintain a wealth shield that protects what has been achieved. The goal is not to accumulate for the sake of accumulating, but for each movement of capital to bring you closer to a state in which you can choose what to do with your time, without economic necessity being the decisive factor. Designing a life where you work for pleasure and not out of obligation requires a deep mental reprogramming. For years, most people have been conditioned to think that work is an inescapable obligation, that rest is earned after decades of effort, and that success is measured by constant occupation. Financial freedom breaks that paradigm and allows you to redefine what work means to you. Maybe you continue to run a business, but because you enjoy the challenge and creativity involved, not because you need to cover bills. Maybe you dedicate your time to social, artistic, or innovation projects that don't generate huge profits but fill your life with purpose. At this point, work stops being a burden and becomes a conscious choice. For many, the transition to this new way of living can generate mixed feelings. On one hand, there's the excitement of being able to completely control one's own time. On the other, the uncertainty of leaving behind a structure that has given them identity for years. Here, it is essential to have clarity of purpose, to know not only what you are freeing yourself from, but what you are heading towards. Financial freedom is not a static end, but a starting point for creating a life aligned with your deepest values, interests, and aspirations. Without a clear purpose, even economic abundance can become empty. Another crucial aspect is to understand that true freedom does not mean isolation or detachment from reality. Even with financial independence, you'll continue to face challenges, make decisions, and adapt to change. The difference is that now you'll do it from a position of strength, with the ability to choose and respond at your own pace. This, in turn, gives you room to contribute more meaningfully to your environment. When money is no longer a daily concern, you can think long-term, invest in causes you care about, and leave a positive impact that transcends your own life. And this is where the concept of legacy comes in.
Legacy is limited to what you inherit in financial terms, but also the values, teachings, and structures you leave to those who come after you. Well-managed wealth can benefit your children, grandchildren, or even generations you won't know, as long as there's a clear plan for its use. This includes trusts, educational funds, sustainable investments, and projects that generate social impact. But beyond the financial aspect, legacy also involves transmitting the mindset that allowed you to build that freedom, the value of smart work, the importance of investing with strategy, and the ability to live according to principles and not just trends. Part of designing this legacy is preparing those who will receive it. Many fortunes are lost in the second or third generation, not because of lack of money, but because of lack of preparation. Educating your family on finances, ethics, and wealth responsibility is one of the most valuable investments you can make. This ensures that a lifetime's effort is not diluted in a few years by impulsive decisions or poor management. Coming to financial freedom also allows you to have a more time-conscious approach. You can organize your days around activities that nourish you physically, mentally, and emotionally, rather than letting external demands dictate your schedule. You can travel without rushing, learn new skills without the pressure to monetize them right away, or pursue projects that may not be profitable but have incalculable personal value. Time, more than money, becomes your most precious resource, and the way you use it will define your quality of life. The ultimate goal is not to retire and do nothing, but to live a life in which every action is the result of a choice and not an obligation. This may involve continuing to work, but on your own terms, continuing to grow, but without sacrificing your well-being, and continuing to build, but from freedom, not from necessity. Financial freedom, properly understood, is not a destination that is reached to stand still, but a platform from which you can live more fully, purposefully, and in control. When you manage to define your financial freedom number, build the systems that sustain it, live in alignment with your values, and leave a solid legacy, you have reached a point where money is no longer the center of your decisions. At that moment, the greatest wealth you own is not in your bank accounts, but in your ability to decide how to live each day. That, in essence, is the ultimate goal, a life in which you own your time, your energy, and your destiny.
There will be moments of fast forward and others when you will feel that nothing changes. There will be days when it will seem that everything works and others when you will want to give up. But each experience, positive or negative, will bring you closer to your goal if you maintain the commitment. Consistency is more powerful than temporary intensity. You can move slowly, but if you never stop, you will go further than those who start strong and give up halfway. Patience and long-term vision will be your best allies. Living by the philosophy of think more, work less, earn more also means surrounding yourself with the right people. The environment directly influences your beliefs, your decisions, and ultimately your results. If you surround yourself with people who constantly complain, who don't take action, and who justify mediocrity, you will absorb those attitudes almost without realizing it. On the other hand, if you surround yourself with individuals who dream big, who dare to act, who share knowledge, and who celebrate the achievements of others, your own ambition and energy will grow. The right relationships can open doors that you would never have found alone, and can give you perspectives that save years of mistakes and frustrations. Plus, starting today means you won't postpone your life hoping for a better future to enjoy. Financial freedom is a worthy goal, but it's not the only one. The real goal is to live fully on the path to it. This involves finding time for your family, for your health, for your passions, and for the experiences that enrich you as a human being. Many people make the mistake of sacrificing decades of their life in a job they hate in the hope of one day living as they wish. That someday often never comes. That's why, while you build your wealth, you must also build your life. Don't wait until you have total freedom to start enjoying what you already have. One last point. The fear of failure and criticism never completely disappears, but your relationship to it changes. When you understand that every mistake is a lesson, that every criticism says more about the person who makes it than it does about you, and that your value does not depend on external approval, you become unstoppable. This does not mean that you ignore feedback, but that you learn to filter it and take only what helps you improve.
Self-confidence is not built with motivational words, but with the evidence of your own actions repeated over and over again until the results speak for themselves. Today, you have the opportunity to choose. You can keep procrastinating, waiting for an ideal moment that may never come, or you can decide that this is the time. The money, freedom, and time you dream of are within reach, but they will not come to you by chance. They require intention, strategy, and above all, action. Think more to choose wisely, work less on what doesn't matter, and dedicate your energy to what does, and you will see how earning more stops being a dream to become your new reality. The awakening of your new life begins the instant you say, "I start now." So, if this audiobook inspired you and you are ready to continue deepening your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click and see you there.
Thank you so much, friend, for listening. Leave your ideas in the comments section so our community can grow by learning together. That's all for now. Until the next audiobook,